The UK toy market is a growing industry. In the last year, it generated sales worth a total of nearly £3 billion. Primarily designed for children, the number of adults who collect action figures has grown significantly. While most collect for fun, some hope to sell on their finds, keeping their possessions in top condition.
The TARDIS is under attack by the Doctor's enemies, Slitheen, Cassandra, and Sycorax. But don't worry, the Doctor can fight them off with his sonic screwdriver.
When Doctor Who returned to our television screens in 2005, a range of action figures was released to coincide with the new series. Since the relaunch, over 300 characters have been immortalized in 5.5-inch plastic form, from the Doctor and his companions to enemies like the Daleks. The range has proved just as popular with adults as well as children, with some collectors spending a small fortune on completing the set. Rare or limited edition sets can go for hundreds of pounds online, especially if they're in their original packaging or, as it's known, mint on card. In this short film, we'll hear from those involved intimately with the world of Doctor Who collectibles. Those who collect for fun, those who collect for profit, those who sell to collectors, and even those involved in the TV series itself.
Directing a whole episode of Doctor Who was brilliant, but it was, for me personally, immensely scary. Now, Doctor Who has an incredibly passionate fan base of not just millions of people in the UK, but these days millions of people across the globe. And they love the show, they really love it, and they are naturally disappointed should they ever, heaven forbid, see a bad episode or an episode that had a lot of potential and doesn't quite live up to, live up to its potential. I am not really a collector in the kind of, collector sense that I don't have all of everything and I don't have a kind of a compulsion to complete sets of things, but I do sort of collect things to do with my Doctor Who episode. When I was a kid, I absolutely loved Lego. I didn't do anything else but play with Lego. And when I find out that I've directed a Doctor Who episode and the merchandisers are going to bring out a building block Lego-like playset from Let's Kill Hitler with all the little motorbikes that we had, I feel that oh my God, I've got to have that because I'm part of having created that and I feel that I'm partly responsible for it and I'm immensely proud to have a little Lego set of my Doctor Who episode. That's kind of actually one of the coolest things that I think that I own.
What encouraged me to start collecting was that I'd been a fan of the show from sort of like the early 1980s and kind of growing up with the programme when it was sort of coming to its natural end. The big change for me was about 1995. I'd finished doing my A-levels and there was a sci-fi shop had just opened up in Liverpool and I went down to volunteer because I was obviously interested in the merchandise side of things. And at that point I suddenly came to realise that there was part of it was about collecting it, but the other part was actually there's money to be made here. And then sort of fast forwarding, because around that time, this was like sort of 96, 97, and the internet was kind of started to become a bit more mainstream. And then the sort of rise of eBay. I thought, actually, you know what, I could do well using eBay as a means of making money. And that's when I started doing it. I just started buying figures out, putting them on eBay with a markup and started making the money that way. And from that, kind of where we are now, it's actually a really successful online business and I'm really happy with the way it's been going. Part of that success is knowing what's coming up, what's happening, what releases are due out. A big part of the knowledge, if you like, comes from online communities. So there's a couple of well-known Doctor Who forum sites, and that can range from anything from discussing the latest spoilers to Peter Capaldi's outfit to what exclusive figures are coming up at one of the conventions. And it's interesting. I I kind of lurk. It's a horrible expression, but I lurk in the background, and it's nice to sort of see what people are talking about. People just buy the figures, and some of them just put them in cupboards, and others like them in the packaging, got to be mint condition. But they're quite passionate about their merchandise and what they're looking for.
I suppose if you have to pinpoint it to one particular thing, there was a book that came out called The Making of Doctor Who by Terence Dicks and Malcolm Hulke back in 1972 from Piccolo. And that book was the first time that there had ever been a book that contained details about all of the early episodes of Doctor Who. And as a fan back then, I absolutely snapped it up. I loved it. You know, it was great reading all about these early things. And from there, I started to collect the cuttings out of Radio Times. I started to collect newspaper cuttings where I found them about the Doctors, the actors, the show. And I started to collect toys and bits and pieces that I saw around, Daleks and all sorts of things. So it was kind of that mid-70s period that really kind of kicked it off for me. One of the problems that I've always had is that I tend to collect everything. If it's got Doctor Who on it, I would kind of like to have one of it, so it's in the collection. I collect all sorts of everything. I'm very eclectic, if you like. So I've not been particularly focused in what I've collected. It tends to be, as I say, a little bit of everything. Doctor Who fandom is extraordinary, and it's all very, very, very all-inclusive. And I think that's an absolutely magnificent achievement. And as I say, I don't know any other fandom which manages to actually achieve that.
Well, I've worked in the store for 14 years now. I was originally like the Saturday girl. So when I started, Doctor Who was not on the TV. There was still a massive fan base for it. People were demanding that it came back on the telly almost constantly while it was off the telly. But you could get audio adventures, which was the CD versions of some stories that had been on the telly, but some that were new stories as well. So there was still new Doctor Who stuff coming out, but the nature of the audio CD meant it was kind of the older fans that were still getting something. And then when it came back on the TV, it just opened this world to a whole new generation of children. So there was toys and the episodes having the visual thing, and they were also aimed, they weren't quite as serious and quite as dark as a lot of the audios. So kids could get on board with it. So little girls and little boys totally have been mad for it ever since it's been back on the telly with Eccleston. And the adults have finally been pleased to see that it's back on the screen. So it's in a very unique place that it can appeal to everybody.
But what is it about collecting that fascinates us, and for some people turns into an obsession? Is it a harmless pursuit, or can it be an indication of a more serious personality trait?
There are many reasons why we collect things, and toys, of course, are an important part of what we collect. Perhaps it's one of the first things that we start collecting in our life. From a psychological point of view, of course, we look at these behaviors because they do sometimes border with pathology, like in the case of hoarding, for example. So hoarding is very upsetting and is a compulsion, so it's something that can be stopped, and has to do with lack of certain things that the people feel they miss in their life, and therefore there is this sense of being full of other things and almost being unable to move. So in a sense your choices are restrained, and then that problem is solved by the sheer presence of this mass in your house. And this is similar to why people might want to have everything that has to do with Doctor Who, even just some piece of paper that they found on the floor that has got, it's a scrap paper from somewhere, maybe cinema ticket or something. It's because at some point the collection takes over, and then it becomes part of who you are, and really parts of your inner self becomes externalized in this collection. They keep growing and showing all the things you've done, the places you've been, the effort and energy you've put in it.
For some collectors, the attraction of action figures is projecting themselves as the characters. But what happens when it's for real? When an actor finds himself immortalized as a 5.5-inch plastic figure?
No, Doctor Who started for me in 1966. I was a young actor, out of work at the time, I think, and I'd only just started. I had a couple of years in the theatre, and I'd done one television before, a programme called Newcomers, and straight after Newcomers, because it was the same production manager, I got this job in Doctor Who. Coming towards me in the bar, I'll never forget it. Was the director called Michael Ferguson with a pile of scripts. There were 6 initially. It's only 4-part now, but there were 6 episodes initially. He said, "What do you look like in gold? And do you think you could do this?" Something like that, he said to me. I didn't know what he was talking about, and he then explained that it was a sort of golden monster. Well, I read it through, and I thought, oh dear, this is going to ruin my career. When they aired this episode, I don't think anybody had ever thought of making little figures of all the people in it, because nobody knew how popular it was going to be. I mean, it was popular at the time, and it had lifelong fans even then, but not to the extent that it is now. I think I was at a convention early last year, and I saw a photograph that Katie had. This is Katie, by the way, there, Katie. That she had, and it was of me and her and the Brigadier. She put them in a flower pot, and then took a photograph of them in a little flower pot. And I said to her, "Where did you get those from? What is this?" And she said, "Oh, they make them. They're action figures, Doctor Who action figures. They make them, and this is us in the Claws of Axos." And I said, "I didn't know anything about this." And so she gave me a copy of the photograph. So I took it home gleefully and showed my wife and family. And I said, I think I'm going to be one of these things. I'm not entirely sure how they thought they could make me, and I presume they got production photographs from various sources, or looked at even at the covers of the DVDs. It gives a very clear indication of what I look like. There's been a myriad photographs going around the conventions and of me that the fans have been buying. It's going to be lovely, and they're going to let me have some copies, of course, and I'll sell them on the black market. Was a joke. It's just lovely. I just love it. Never expected it, of course. You think how long I've been an actor now, and never for a minute did I think anybody ever would want to make a figure of me. So it's terrific. I'm very proud. It's a terrific thing to have. So it will be on my mantelpiece forever.